I don't want a clinician that doesn't understand the aspect of diagnoses, and that when it comes to depression or anxiety, I think of it like the anger iceberg. The Titanic sank because of what was below the water, not because of what was above the water.
Welcome back to the Found Free Podcast. I'm your host, Sabia Wade. This is part 2 with Raquel Martin. Here we talk about collective liberation and the aspects of self-care, community, entrepreneurship, I cannot get that word right, and everything in between. So let's get back to you, Dr. Martin. Does it feel weird? People like Dr. Martin. I guess you're used to it now.
No, I think I'm used to it. I didn't even realize I was always saying like Dr. Martin here until like just dealing with people saying, what are your credentials? And I was like, oh, bachelor's, 2 masters, doctorate, postdoc, internship, publications, all of it.
So much school.
Yeah. So I just started saying it as Dr. Martin because it's just like, you seem to be confused. Let me clarify it for you. Like, you know, I make it look easy, so maybe you think there are no credentials, but that's just because I'm so good. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
So yeah, no, it's not weird.
I understand. Sometimes I have to do that too. Like, in my own different way, I have to do it because, like, you know, I'm a doula. So people are like, oh, you're not this or that. Then I have to like kind of like,
yeah. It's because you're too good at what you do. I can say like the impetus of these decisions and the you know, consequence of your actions, or I can also say run up, get done up. That seems like that's what's happened. Like you talk shit, you got hit. You know what I'm saying? Like same thing. Scientifically, but like, yeah. So
I love how you bring the science and also like the culture.
Yeah, it's just like I can do a quote with some of the greatest doctors, or I can let you know in like a Jay-Z lyric, like,
yeah,
that seems like that's what happened to you, right?
So let's go back to, because I am a doula, right? That's my trade. That's where I started. That's my thing. That's where I like my lens as to which I see the world is reproductive justice. And so I write about it in my book, but I would love for you to talk about my book, Birth and Liberation. How do we, when we talk about trauma, right? Like, how do we talk about that in the stages of how do we transfer that to our fetus? So we talked about that in part 1 a little bit, but for some people that can seem like a really wild concept. Like, what do you mean? My mom and my grandmother, if they went through trauma, that it came to me just off the strength of being in the body. Yeah. So can you speak about that a little bit?
I think about it a lot in terms of like nutrients, right? Like a lot of times you're thinking of when you go to the doctor, they're asking if you're eating, everything you're eating, your child is eating. A lot of times I've told people like you are what you eat, but that comes to like thought processes and words. You don't have to eat everything that's put in front of you, right? We're ingesting more things than just food. We're ingesting joy and excitement, being ecstatic. We're ingesting pain and anguish, and everything adjusts our cells, our DNA. Like if you aren't having enough calcium, that's your child is going to have a calcium deficit, right? So I think about it the same way as in utero. Like if our cells literally alter to the impact of the trauma and the pain around us, basically, because anytime you're dealing with trauma, you are accessing, initiating like fight, flight, freeze response, right? You're going to have an influx of hormones that prepare your body to deal with this attack, with this trauma that you're dealing with. And you have to realize that if things keep upregulating, they're not going to be able to downregulate as much. Think about like you can keep stretching a rubber band, but eventually it's not going to go back to its original shape. It's one of the reasons why high blood pressure isn't solely about what you're eating. When you are experiencing trauma and stress, your blood pressure increases, but it's putting more pressure on your veins and everything like that. So when you keep pushing it out, it can't go back to its normal shape. And so your baseline.
Too, like when we're talking about the baseline, which is a great point, like that's what I'm getting into, is like when we're talking about weathering, right? Just like racism-induced stress that's happening on a day-to-day. So like before you even become pregnant, right, your rubber band is already quite loose.
Your baseline is already higher. That's why it's so dangerous to have this aspect of like, I focus on, my specialty is Black mental health. And I get asked all the time, like, how is it different? Your mental health and well-being is inextricably linked to the way the world treats you. Our baselines are going to be different. And even the fact that like, I will always appreciate, I like the fact that you say racism-related stress, because a lot of times people will say race-based stress. There's no such thing as race-based stress because race isn't the issue. Racism is the issue. There's nothing wrong with my race, even though there's only one race, but like my race or my culture, there's something wrong with the way I'm treated because of what my race brings out for you, right? So our baselines are higher, right? And I got asked one time, when is it too young to teach about racism? And I said, oh, my children experience racism in utero. So I would say probably as young as my child can experience it is as young as your child can learn about it as well. And I think people don't see it that way. Racism in terms of our pain perception. Well, Black people and Black women were seen as like, we don't experience pain. Our skin is thicker.
It was like, what, maybe 5 years ago where they changed like more of the literature around like Black people. There was, like,
oh yeah,
it wasn't that long ago.
We have a decreased likelihood of being prescribed pain medications. The same way there are food apartheids with less access to healthy foods. Pharmacies that are in highly populated Black areas actually don't have as much access to pain medication. So even if it's the pain medication that you got prescribed, you likely have to go out of your way if you have the ability to get it in the first place. I think maybe a decade ago there was a study with not Black doctors, with European American doctors, and they were asking them like, what are your perceptions in terms of these myths? Like, is this true or false? Everything was a myth. Black people experience pain differently. They mark them true. So that's what I'm saying. Oppressors play the long game. These are people will think about it ancestry like, oh, well, the 70-year-old doctor isn't going to be as woke as the 40-year-old doctor. They did this in med school. This is in training, and they don't understand that we don't need bigger gauge needles.
There's also too, right? Like, I think one of the things that and I hear like in my work as a doula, and I think it goes across all fields of care work, where there's like this understanding like, well, if you have racially congruent care, then that's going to make everything better, right?
And that's not the case. I like, the thing is, I am in no way under the impression that Black people are the only people who can serve Black people. What I want is someone who practices with cultural humility. I want someone who's going to be educated. Now, there's this certain aspect of understanding there's certain things you're only going to get with walking in our own skin. But if you don't take the time to educate yourself, I'm a Black woman. That doesn't mean that the Black woman sitting across from me has the same dynamic, because if anything, we don't even talk about all the diversity within the individuals of African descent who immigrated here and now they're Black and they're like, I'm from Haiti.
It's a whole different culture.
It's a whole different culture, right? So you can't make that assumption that because the person who's sitting across from you looks like you, or maybe they sound like you, because maybe they're masking as well, that they have the same experiences as you. You still need to ask people and get education. When I'm telling people who they're looking for therapists, I'm like, okay, I have a whole guide. And you ask for consultation sessions. It's like a 30-minute session. It's typically free, but you ask them questions too, because like, why should I be giving you my 150 to 275 every single week?
Like, sometimes when we assume, right, we make that assumption of like, if the person across from me looks the same, that I will be safer, that there is a gaslighting that we do to ourselves when we're feeling that something isn't right.
Oh yeah,
like I had a
go
therapist,
get your cousin or something. Like,
yeah,
I'm sure they didn't.
I had a therapist before that. Like, I mean, tried her best, but I was like, is it me?
I was like,
I was like, I'm just not. Like, I'm not. Like, this is not. And I've been to like white therapists and like, whatever the case may be. And I was like, I just don't. Is it me? Like, am I the person who's not connecting? But it's because like in my brain, I was like, you're Black, I'm Black. Like,
you're trying to fight this cognitive dissonance of what you expect.
But this therapy was so basic, and I'm like, are you listening to me? Like,
I fired a Black woman too. Like, my first psychologist that I had, she was Black, and it just wasn't. We didn't have many goals. And I remember at one point saying, I feel like I'm not using your skills to the best of the capacity that you have, which is my kind of way of being like, you need to show up.
Yeah.
Because I'm over. And it just didn't work. So I found somebody new. There shouldn't be the assumption. I was just talking to my students about the fact that like licensed professionals have caused just as much harm as unlicensed professionals.
Absolutely.
I've seen just as many racists in the boardroom as I have the bus stop. Don't make an assumption. Don't let that short out your critical thinking, short out the way that your body protects itself when you feel like something isn't right just because they look like you. Because they're no matter what, I'm going to be the expert in the room when it comes to mental health and psychology, but you're always going to be the expert in the room when it comes to you. Same with any healthcare professional, right? So don't let that short circuit your brain to the point where you're not keying in on things that make you feel uncomfortable, that make you feel like they're not listening to you, that make you feel like they're not advocating for you. Don't let that short it.
Where comes from though? Because I feel like I do tend to aim for, I'm going to say I do tend to aim for Black care providers, right? But I also tend to aim for people that are educated in whatever the hell I got going on. You know what I'm saying? Like, I remember when I like went and I got my breast reduction, and like I was like, in Atlanta, there tends to be more Black doctors. But when I saw his portfolio, he had a lot of Black people in there. I was like, oh, that's how I want my boobs to look like. It looks like he has a little skill set here. Like, it's like, cool. Like, you're educated. You understand that my skin might keloid, and I've had a history of that. Like, you're in tune, right? And then it's like in other spaces, like especially when it comes to like my like psychiatric care, I tend to aim for Black people because I'm like, when I talk about my anxiety, when I talk about my depression, when I talk about my agoraphobia, when I talk about my like other neurodiversity things that I have going on, the lens is different, right? Not saying that just because they're Black that is perfect, but they said, like, I remember when I went to my my psych nurse, right? And I had my hysterectomy in January, and the thing that I did, which was like my own exploration of self, was like, let me not be on meds. Although I had my child, that uterus was kicking my ass, so I had to be on whatever to get me through. You understand? Yeah. I was on my meds, whatever. But I got off of them because I was like, let me experience myself and like see like what is my baseline. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I recognized was like I wasn't depressed, and that surprised me because in January especially I'm very depressed. So I like let it skate for a little bit longer, and I saw I was having like other issues like a hyper focus. Makes me a great entrepreneur, right? But also through my relationship with my partner, another Black woman, it was like, yeah, but you're not eating, and you're not doing this, and you're not doing that. And I was like, oh, like every time I had talked to somebody else who didn't have like a inside look or a cultural context to like why I work so hard, or like what the anxiety is in my brain, right? The messages of like, you know, I come from these generations and I have to like work hard and I have to like do it for myself. Like it was like I needed someone to have that context. Yeah. And she was the first person that brought up to me like, do you ever think like you're not dealing with depression and anxiety, but that's a symptom of maybe ADHD? And maybe you have a symptom of like, you know, and I was like, everyone just always told me depression and anxiety. And we literally like changed my meds and went through the whole thing. And I'm like on different meds. And I'm like, oh, these meds are more supportive to me than the other meds. And I'm like, I don't know if I wouldn't have gotten that if I wasn't with a Black doctor or a Black psych, specifically psych, because I feel like our things show up differently. So I want to hit on that a little bit, just kind of like how our brain, the way that we show up, even when we're in distress. Because like I've been in distress, dissociating, like body over here, brain over here.
And you probably look calm to anyone.
And everyone else is like, calm, you're cool, you're getting things done. And I'm like, actually tomorrow I won't even remember what I got done.
Yeah.
Right. So, but it shows up differently. Like when I'm talking to, you know, even people that like love and care for me who are like not of my cultural context, they can't identify like you're not yourself because they're like, oh, you're doing it. Oh, you're Superwoman.
Yeah.
And now like, but a Black person is like my Black psych nurse, she's like, no.
I always feel like, because sometimes people will say that they're code switching, and I don't find many Black people code switching. Code switching is the basic aspect of code means language, switching means goes back and forth. What I find that most people are doing is creating whole avatars, of themselves, which is masking. And if you remember the movie, the old school movie,
I just did the autism test, the one about like which scores like you're camouflaging. And my highest score was masking.
And it's not even, so like most of the research for masking is with individuals who've been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. However, Black people do it all the time, right? And if you remember from the mask, if they put the mask on, he kept putting it on, it was harder to take off. A lot of times deciding to choose to look for Black clinicians and Black professionals is a survival mechanism. We all understand that racism is dangerous. It severs the safety of an environment. It can really literally be life or death. So it's a protective factor. It's a survival mechanism to try to search out someone who may be less likely to be racist towards you. That's why most people will automatically look for it. You also don't want to have to do the extra work of having to explain different concepts. Black people have this aspect of collective consciousness where we genuinely want to see people do better. So a lot of times if we're going to purchase things, we want to purchase things from people who we know we're putting into their community. But looking for Black clinicians, that's a survival mechanism. I'm going to try to be in an environment that's less likely to be racist.
When it comes to my brain.
Yeah, in your body, like, right? Yeah, like someone who's going to have autonomy of what they prescribe you, whether you get listened to, whether they're going to advocate for you.
Or understand why I'm fearful of going up in a medication.
Yes.
Understand why.
You don't want to worry about addiction. Yes. You don't want to, I still got to go to work. How long am I going to be hazy on this? I have work. I've already taken one sick day. If I take two, they're going to think I'm lazy because I'm the only Black person there. Like, you want someone who gets that. So that's typical. That's a protective factor. But a big thing is also the assessment piece. You're concerned that people aren't going to understand, like, that you're masking. Oh, she seems fine. I know she just had a really traumatic event that's objectively traumatic, but she seems okay. So I don't think she has PTSD versus other people being like, there's a Black people have always had to go into different environments and whether they were safe or not, pretend that they were, or it was life or death. So you want someone to understand that. But that can also come from a clinician that's not Black if they take the time to educate themselves, right?
Yeah.
I don't want a clinician who doesn't understand the difference between masking and code switching. I don't want a clinician that doesn't understand the aspect of diagnoses and that when it comes to depression or anxiety, I think of it like the anger iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
The Titanic sank because of what was below the water, not because of what was above the water. Mm-hmm. Above the water is anger. Below can be shame and guilt and disgust and sadness. But if you're automatically perceiving the person across from you as a threat, if you're automatically perceiving that you're used to individuals whose feelings have always been affirmed, and we get back to thinking about freedoms, I don't like when European American people and Black people are compared in terms of their expression of emotions, in terms of the way they share emotions, because they have never been told that their emotions are dangerous. They have never been told that they're not allowed to have them. Mm-hmm. So why wouldn't you feel free discussing things? You've never been told to shut up or you're going to be sold or given away. You've never been told that there's anything wrong with emotions. Of course, they're going to be more free with emotions. Your emotions have always been affirmed.
And that also sometimes, like, I know for me, I could say for me personally, and I don't know if anyone else has experienced, sometimes like when I see like white people crying, I'm like, must be so nice.
Because it's a freedom, right?
Yeah, I'm like,
and when we come back
so
to the
nice.
intergenerational
You could do that
trauma,
anywhere. You could do it at work. You do it here. You could do it there. And I'm just like, and I'm like, literally, right, a person with like fibromyalgia, right? All these highly activated, my body is just activated.
And you're being told to suck it up.
And I'm like, there is no space for me to cry here.
And not only those tears you're allowed to cry, those tears are dangerous. Mm-hmm. Are they not? Like, that your tears can cause everything.
Am I going to be perceived as angry? Am I going to be perceived as unwell? Am I going to be perceived as
ungrateful? How dare you cry at this job that you got that we gave you? Not to mention that the fact that you're probably more qualified. How dare you cry at the fact that you were harmed in a relationship? I mean, you should just be happy that I don't beat on you. These men out here, there's women out here got 5 different families. I come home to you every night. Mm-hmm. So what if I spent the mortgage? Okay, it was a good bet. It comes out in every single realm and every single relationship, and it comes back to the intergenerational trauma of lack of freedoms. And they come out in all relationships, right? They don't just come out in work with having stress of feeling like I can't keep taking off because I'm going to be perceived as lazy. It also comes the aspect of like trauma. A lot of people who have experienced trauma in any realm, whether it's generational trauma, whether it's direct from parents, whether it's from relationships, there's a lot of power struggles in those relationships because trauma steals your choice. So you're going to take that power back any way you can, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think many people think about it that way. Like, I want to work with you.
I think especially for like Black folks, like thinking about like taking power back any way you can.
We have a lot of problems with authority, but I think it's justified, right?
Yeah.
Like, my perception of everybody
but it's also
is
to me, it's like the way that I want to dress, the way that I want, especially as like me being a business owner. Like I did that on purpose. Did I know it was going to be hard? Sure, but I was like, I'm tired of people talking about what my hair looks like and how I have to talk. And even like in my space, like I definitely like part of how I control my anxiety is like everything has a place, right?
Yeah.
But I also feel like that's a part of like I have to get my power.
You don't want anyone to impose their will upon you, which I think is understandable with having a generation of people who couldn't even choose the clothes that they wore, could even choose to take care of their own children instead of taking care of other people's. It's understandable we have a problem with authority because who decided that you got to be the authority over me?
That part.
Like generationally, it's an issue. And I would also say when it comes to the work environment, I've always said that like, I don't, this aspect of entrepreneurship, so many people, I think that a lot of entrepreneurs will be okay with working for companies, right? No one woke up and decided like, oh, I don't want to work 50 hours a week.
FYI, people that are entrepreneurs, including myself, we have those moments where you're like, I could just go back to this company or go to a company, get a job that's going to be very steady. I know my commitment. I know the benefits. I know this.
Yeah.
And I know for myself, then I start thinking about the freedom aspect. And I have to ask to go do this, and I got to ask for the vacation. And I'm like, never mind, I'll just struggle over here.
Yeah, I don't think people woke up and said, I don't want to work 40 hours a week. I want to work 120 hours a week. Because that's what entrepreneurship is. They decided that they were sick of being in an environment that really wasn't meant for them, having to be forced to conform to an environment, having to be forced to have to check in and out for just basic things. They decided that they didn't want to act like they were in an environment that wasn't going to conform to them, so they created their own. That exit aspect, that taking back that freedom, that happens in all relationships, right? So many entrepreneurs, I'm just like, but for real though, if you could find a job, you work 40 hours a week, you didn't have to worry about payroll, and they actually respected you as a person, would you turn in that LLC in a minute? I would be like, well, you know what? I'm going to retire this because I don't need this EIN. I got, like all that. But that's also a response to taking your autonomy and your power back. I think that comes out in relationships as well, like romantic relationships, friendships, parenthood. A lot of times, the people that I've seen who decided to be child free, it's not because they have no experience with children. It's because they have all the experience with children.
I'm a doula and I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah. Or they grew up taking care of younger children, right?
And adultification.
Yeah. Right. Like you see
and that
what
was
happens.
A survival thing, right? Like your mom had to go to work and like,
yeah,
had to be taken care of. And I think for me, like I'm an only child on my mom's side. But like for me, it's like as a doula, when I started off with incarcerated folks, I started off with people, substance abuse, like all these intersections.
Mm-hmm.
And like, but even going into the homes that we deem as like regular, right?
Yeah.
Like normal, healthy spaces, I was like, this is a lot. Like, and I'm good because I don't think I can do the whole you wake me up at 5 o'clock in the morning just because. I don't think I am able to, like,
and that's a choice that you should be able to make, right? Like, think about, I saw someone saying so many parents complain these days, what happened to like my grandma had like 5 kids. Well, your grandma probably couldn't even, she couldn't work. I saw something that said that marriages are in the decline. I actually don't think that statistic was true, but I don't think marriages are in the decline. Bad marriages, obligatory marriages, child marriages, those are on the decline. And I hope they burn to the ground, right? It used to be that like you couldn't even get a credit card. It used to be that unless you had a husband, God forbid, you couldn't even get access to birth control, let alone say no if you didn't want to have sexual intercourse, let alone afterwards being like, I don't want to have this child. Of course you literally needed a partner to survive. And I think it's interesting to see what individuals do, not because they need you to survive, but because you compliment them in a way, right? Yeah. I'm married.
And that's my life. Like I literally, when people are like, what's your thing? I'm like, I want to just live my life being myself.
Yeah.
And I want to
should be the goal.
I want to do things like, even in my partnership with my partner, like, even like in the beginning, she was kind of like, what do you need me for? Like, what is this thing? And I was like, I need you for a lot. Like, I wouldn't want to say need. I was like, I would like to have you here for a lot. I would like.
You think it's better to be wanted than needed?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
To be needed.
Yeah, and I'm like, I
need you, so I guess I'll make you dinner.
Support. I love you here for like the things you do. I love the collaboration that we have. I love our partnership. I love these things, but I never like when I ever feel like I have to be with you. Right. And like in a way that doesn't feel like my safety and my choice is being taken away.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in this anymore.
Yeah.
I always want to feel like I'm showing up here because I want to show up here.
Yeah. My children need me.
Exactly.
My husband could survive without me fine. Will it be a decline? It would. No, if you're watching this episode. But he could survive without me just fine. I think it's more, I would rather be wanted. And then the thing with like families, there are many of my patients who weren't given the family that they deserve or the family that deserved them. Mm-hmm. I feel like family of origin and family of choice are comparable. But the same way we mentioned the aspect of modeling appropriate behaviors, it's hard to know what you deserve. It's hard to know that something is unhealthy when that's what you've been embedded in, right? It's hard to... There's a scene in the movie Crooklyn by Spike Lee, yes, where... And here's the thing, Spike Lee, if you have to explain the why something like he changes the camera when they visit their families in the country, and he stated that he changed the camera because it was supposed to be like her being in Wizard of Oz, like it was a totally different world, right? They're not screaming, everything is cleaner, all of that things. That's how it comes out in all of our relationships, right? Like a lot of times we have this emotional residue from previous relationships that you're lashing out at, and it's harder to build those things, right? You have people trying to impose their will on you generationally, like we're descendants of enslaved Africans, right? And taking that power back is really hard. So it shows up in like, you're not going to tell me what to do, even if this is best for me. And even though I actually said this, I don't want you to impose your will. It takes a while to like be able to break that down, because the same way you mentioned like that zooming in is really good for you in the work environment. I think a lot of individuals don't realize, especially Black people don't realize, that the things that serve us in one environment are likely not going to serve us in all environments. As a psychologist, as someone who's been in school forever, I had to begin with the end in mind. I had to advocate for myself in everything. I had to be persistent and relentless in everything, no matter what. Do it all myself, because I was one of the few people there. In my romantic relationships and in my friendships, it'd be detrimental. I wouldn't be able to maintain a relationship because that's not the thing that serves me in everything.
I'm learning now to like not hyper-focus in my relationships the way that I hyper-focus in other spaces. I'm actually like being like, at work, I do have to show up a certain way because I am the boss here.
Yeah.
Right? but I do ask for help, and I do have a team because I'm not here for doing all this.
Well, that's good for asking for help too.
Yeah, but it's like in my like relationships, I have to give people time to figure it out. Like I don't have to figure it out, and I feel like that's like, you know, like switching to this concept of like to generational hope, right? It's like in what I'm doing right now, how I am right now, like addressing my mental health things, like addressing where I'm seeking control, that I'm like, is it healthy for me to always seek control in every little space? No, some of it is healthy, right? And then some of it is not healthy. Some of it actually harms me.
It's a lack of trust of others, right? Because like I can relinquish control when I feel like the trust is there, right? Jill Scott said something like, if you could tell me what to do, you could tell me what to do. But if you can't tell me what to do, you can't tell me what to do. Like, there are very few people who can lead me, but it's because I trust them, right? And that concept, think about that, how that is in like the trauma aspect of it. Like, think about how it is in relationships and trying to build not even just romantic relationships, but friendships.
Yeah.
Like, just
I mean, I feel a lot of people can build relationships, like romantic relationships, more than they can build friendships.
And the two go hand in hand, right? Because other than like, you know, being intimate with my husband, my friends and we the same, like, locked in. Like, I treat you with the same respect.
My partner
my husband.
My partner's like, oh, I know, like, my partner, like, we're long distance. Like, my partner will clear up to bed. Like, I know Brittany's going to bed, like, my best friend. Brittany's like, get in bed with you. Like, I spend, like, I'm intimate with my friends.
Yeah.
Because, like, I need that. And that also, for me, is, like, a way of, like, again, like building generational hope of like, I can see my friends as important as my partner.
And being deserving of those relationships. Because think about how many relationships were severed, right? The same way we have this thought process of, you know, maybe not getting too close or letting people be too close with you. That was a protective factor of our ancestors. Imagine how painful it would have been to think, I don't know if this child is going to stay. Having your body taken away from you. Sure. And the same way that gets passed down a generation, we need to understand that. I think if individuals are going to try to build relationships and build that generational hope, you have to also take the time to acknowledge that these are things that are done to you and that it's not normal. We're affiliative people. We're supposed to have relationships. You can take any path to healing. It could be therapy. It can be exercise. But no matter what, that path is going to be paved with community, right? That's how it's supposed to be. But it's hard for us to do that when we are built off of a people who they systemically made it a point to sever our ties with each other, right? So I think if anyone wants to do better at building relationships, they have to first acknowledge that the history, the benchmark of what we're based on is individuals trying to sever it just simply because they understood that we were stronger together, and realize that it's not, there's nothing wrong with like trusting individuals. You have to give people the ability
and also
to be in there.
Realize that and actually for myself, I realized that like there's nothing wrong with trusting people, and there's also understanding that if it does go wrong, because people do lie no matter what color they are.
And you'll never know why they lied. Don't take this time to figure out why they lied. Yeah. Like, I wonder why they did that.
Yeah,
like, I don't know. People
will hurt you, but it's like I have the capability to recover.
Yes, you have to. That's a trust thing. You have to trust yourself. You have to trust your body to be able to do it, and not in a specific speed of time, right? A lot of times when individuals are grieving, and I don't think we grieve enough. Culturally, we need to grieve, like the aspect of not being able to learn more about ourselves and understand that can happen throughout your entire lifespan. But also grieving the context of missed opportunities, complicated, like all of these things. We have to provide ourselves with the ability to grieve and not try to get back to the person who we were before the incident happened, right? Like so many times I have patients who will be like, I want to be who I was before. That person doesn't exist anymore. You got to focus on compassion and loving the person that you are now. Because I'm of the belief that like forgiveness, the only forgiveness that's required is forgiving yourself. You want to forgive other people, feel free. But your healing can't hinge on someone else, because if they drop dead tomorrow, what does that mean? That you stuck at this part because, they never told me that they accepted my apology.
So what are the top 3 like lines of advice like that you would give, or like 3 things that you would say to someone who's like moving from trauma, right? Especially Black people, Black people specifically, right? Moving through trauma, whether it's generational or something that's, just happening in their present life. But also aiming to move into generational hope. Because I feel like that sometimes people get stuck in the conversation of trauma, which is like, yes, for sure. It's happening every single day. Yes, right? But I'm like, also like, we're here on earth, and like, we have to see the blessings, and we have to see the good somewhere. Like, babe, we gotta find it somewhere. Sometimes for me, it's like, I'm just happy that I got my favorite food today.
Yeah, or breaking it down.
I'm just happy that I can. My dogs love me today. I'm just happy that my partner checked in. I'm like, like, so what are just like your 3 like quick top 3 things that you would say to someone in that space?
I would say slow down. We talked earlier about that aspect of like where does that feel happen in your body? And you're like, oh, it's so annoying. I was like, yeah, but it's annoying because it makes you slow down, right? Slow down so that you can recognize not only what's happening in your body, but what's happening in your mind, because feelings are not facts. Feelings are cues. You can't pay attention to those cues if you're not slowing down, right? So I can feel a certain way, but that doesn't mean that that's actually what's happening. But as a psychologist, I'm never going to 100% know the facts. I know some of my clients lie to me. Y'all not that good at it. But like, I'm going to know how that scenario made you feel, right? And we're going to key into the feelings. That's where my entry point is going to be. I don't know if they said this and you said that and they said this, but I do know that no matter what, that feeling is, that's what we're zoning in on. So feelings are not facts, but they are cues. So to be able to listen to them, and when we are talking about the aspect of trauma, you mentioned disassociation. You don't key into your feelings. That's a protective factor. Those huge gaps in your memory, no one dissociates at the most joyful time in their life.
Literally, like 2020 externally for me, my business went up quadruple. Everything was like whatever, because everyone was investing in Black everything, right? And like but also I lost 4 people in 2 weeks. One of them being like my grandfather and like my other grandfather, then my uncle, then like my doula friend, all in like 2 weeks time. So, like, I look back at 2020 now, like 4 years later, and I can't remember a lot of it.
It's a protective factor. Disassociation is a protective factor. Your body's like, I genuinely I can't take in this much pain. I have to exit.
But if you ask everyone, like, externally, they were like, you were teaching and you were doing everything was going on. I'm like, I don't really remember it.
And there was a brick wall between you and that. And one of the things about therapy is that, like, it knocks down that brick wall. It's why it's like, it's going to be tough. So I would say, slow down on that aspect, and acknowledging emotions is really honoring your ancestors when it comes to Black people, because we weren't even allowed to have emotions, let alone the range of emotions. There's a difference between happy and ecstatic, sad and depressed, all of that. So that would be one thing. Another thing I would say is pay attention to the emotional residue of your encounters, right? There are so many times when I think people, it doesn't happen as much now, but sometimes people would talk to me like they didn't have the sense that God gave them. And I wouldn't trip most of the time, because I would be like, I didn't do anything to earn that. So yeah, I'm kind of going to dip on this. Like, I'm just going to take what I take. And, some people are walking around with this emotional residue from like a previous encounter that day or a negative relationship. And they're not really slowing down to realize that, like, I'm over here snapping at you, but we had our meeting at 3. I've actually been mad at this phone call I had since 8. And I took that out on you. And now I'm just spewing all this stuff on you, right?
Yeah. I think it's like a part of just like, I think the pieces I love about your approach to this work is just like, it's very human. It's very real. And it's like, because sometimes, like, even if you're talking about generational trauma, you can go all the way out here and forget about what happened today. Right, because you're like, it's so deep, and it's like, but also
let's get in the kiddie pool today, yo. Like, here, like, you talk about last year, your bill need to be paid today. Like, let's bring it on back.
But I appreciate your approach. I follow you, obviously. That's why you're in this space. Like, I also love your commentary. Like, when you just be going off in paragraphs about like whatever you're feeling about whatever.
I know, and typically it's like when I'm like, let me tell you why this made me.
Yeah. But how do people reach you? How do they get in contact with you? How do they do the things?
So you can find me, Raquel Martin, PhD, on every single platform, from LinkedIn to TikTok to Threads. I also have a mental health community, the Mind Your Mental community, where we do webinars every single month, the ebook with the webinar. We do lives. I don't often go live on social media, but within my mental health community, you guys are investing in me, so I invest in you as well. And then I have a podcast, the Mind Your Mental podcast. I always think I should have had a different name for the podcast and the community.
But I really to the Mind Your Mental podcast.
Oh yeah. Okay. I'm not going to have this set up now.
Oh no, we can do it like on.
It's going to be online. Like I have
it's fine.
An Apple, like a Logitech.
No, I have a
digital camera.
Yeah, I love being at home.
Yes. So yes, definitely. And we focus on everything is like Black mental health, and we have not had a doula yet.
Oh, so yeah,
so it's going to be the first doula.
Yeah, let's do it.
No pressure.
I don't feel any pressure. I'm so excited. But yeah, thank you for your time. I'm grateful for you, your work, the lens as to which you see your work, because I think that's like the lens, like you said, of any practitioner, right? It's like, what is their lens? How do they view it? Because that's going to also be like put on you and how they assess you and how you come out of that space and how you work within that space.
Yeah, you could have 3 different clinicians. They all see the same patient. One diagnoses them with depression. One diagnoses them with a behavioral disorder. One diagnoses them with adjustment disorder. It all comes down to their education and the way they see you and your humanity and whether they take the time to listen to what's going on.
And we're going to listen. We're going to work. Well, we hope y'all going to listen because I mean, we can go to a whole conversation about the medical complex and all that. But you going to listen.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for viewing us and listening to us and getting into all this. And I hope that this conversation was filling and hopeful, and also that you're able to see yourself in parts of this and not shame yourself in the parts that you see. Mm-hmm. So thank you. This is a Found Free podcast. I'm your host, Sabia Wade. You can reach me everywhere at Sabia Wade. And I love y'all, and I'll see y'all soon.